Hello, SUGEE people! Welcome back to SUGEE Podcast. This is your host, Kristi Tanya, and today we will talk about avoid black company by knowing the Japanese labor rights. So, what are you waiting for? Let's check it out.
Welcome back to SUGEE Podcast.
SUGEE people, have you ever heard about the terms black company? Hey, maybe some of you ever heard this kind of terms, but based on Wikipedia, black company is a Japanese term for an exploitative sweatshop type employment system. So scary, right? So, SUGEE people, do you want to work in Japan but afraid that you will be overworked? Yes, indeed. The terms of karoshi or working until death is awful. Most Japanese, of course foreigners, scared whenever they hear these terms. Besides, the Japanese rigid and serious working attitudes make it seems difficult to get adapted to the Japanese working environment. And okay, today we will talk about the essential labor rights that you need to know if you consider working in Japan to avoid getting overworked or to avoid black company, to avoid working at black company. Okay, guys, now let's talk about overtime. So, the maximum working hours allowed by the Japanese labor standard is 40 hours over 6 days. If your employer insists that there should be any overtime on your workplace, they should make an agreement that must be signed by either a trade union representing over 50% of the workforce of a workers' representative. Without this agreement, any forced overtime works or even voluntary works is not allowed. So please be careful. And everyone who works more than 40 hours per week should be paid at a rate of 125% of their basic salary, and all late night shift work that has been done in between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., even though it's less than 40 hours, must be paid at 135% of the basic salary. So, if you work on your designated non-working day, you must be paid at the rate of 135% of your basic salary, regardless of your weekly working hours. Furthermore, if you work over the number of hours stated in your contract, but less than 40 hours, you should be paid for this time, even though it's not 125%. Okay, is that clear about the overtime? So, you guys should not do any overtime without getting more payment or more money. Okay, and each overtime should be stated on the contract. Okay, next, let's talk about the labor contract. Okay, so every labor contract should meet at least minimum requirement of labor standard law set by the Japanese government. This is not only valid for Japanese but also for foreign workers who are working in Japan. The maximum length of a labor contract is 3 years, even though there is unlimited contract available in Japan. You should renew the contract at some points. So the things should be included in your contract is length of the contract. Either this is 1 or 5 or 3 years or like something like that, or unlimited. And the wages, methods for deciding the wages and the calculating and how they pay the wage. Also the type of the contract, whether it's renewable or or non-renewable, or a renewable based on performance contract. And set of the working hours. If your contract and actual working condition differ, you may cancel your contract immediately. Be noticed. Be noticed, SUGEE people. So if your actual working condition really different with your contract, you may cancel your contract immediately. And then let's talk about the firing or contract non-renewal by the employer. So it was stated on the Japanese labor standard that an employer can't suddenly fire an employee without any prior notification. An employer must give 30 days notice or 90 days pay in place of notice. So even though you are still on the probation period, your employer cannot fire you without notice after you completed 14 days of your contract. An employer should give a proper reasons for contract non-renewal. Also, employers should give 30 days notice for non-renewal before they end such a contract. An employer cannot set a predetermined fine for the employee who is quitting during the contract. Next is the work culture. Okay, let's talk about the work culture. First is about tardiness or lateness. If your company doesn't have specific working rules about lateness, they may not be able to fine you for your lateness. A fine is an amount subtracted from your pay over and above the deduction for the time you were late. So if you come to work 5 minutes late and your employer didn't pay you for those 5 minutes, this would not be a fine. However, if your company has properly registered working rules regarding lateness, they have the rights to fine you for your lateness. But please be aware that the fine for one instance of lateness cannot exceed half a day's pay, and the total fines in a month cannot exceed 10% of your monthly salary. The calculation for a half day pay is as follows. So the total salary for the 3 months preceding the fine divided by the total number of days in the 3 months preceding the fine multiplied by 0.5. And then second, break time. So in the Japanese labor standard, it was stated that the break time which company must give to their employee is as below. For 6 hours or more shift, you must be allowed to get a 45 minutes break, and for a shift of 8 or more hours, you must be allowed a 1 hour break. The break time should be given at a reasonable time. For example, if you work from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m., the break time should be 1 hour between 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. It is prohibited if your employer gives you unreasonable time to take a break in the morning time. For example, take a break in the 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. or late afternoon before you finish your work, and 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. Yeah, some black company didn't give their employee break time, and if they give their break time will be like before they go back home. It's really unfair, I think. And then let's talk about the wage or salary. The salary must be paid at a predetermined time that is stated on your labor contract each month. And you must inform the labor standard office if your employer doesn't pay your salary or they pay your salary later than the predetermined time. Please be aware that your employer is still obligated to pay at least 60% of your wages even though they went bankrupt and close their enterprise, or when they don't allow you to work during your scheduled time. So guys, if your employer pay you late, you can inform the labor standard office. And then let's talk about holiday. Okay, holiday. There is no law that states about 6 days and national holidays. However, there are some rules on how calculating allowable flexible paid holidays based on the number of years of service. Part-timers are also covered by this law, and their paid holidays are based on the number of days worked per week and the length of the service. When you take time off, you are paid the following for the day. So for the full-time salary employee, for the numbers of hours you would have normally worked, you will get paid that. And for a part-timers, there are some formula to calculate this. You can check on our magazine actually about this. And the paid holidays owed to you by your company are separate from the set holidays offered by the company and are often paid for salaried workers and unpaid for all hourly paid workers. Okay, no, SUGEE people, we hope you are now aware of the most essential labor rights in Japan. And SUGEE people, this rule also valid for any employers who want to recruit any foreigners or Japanese workers to work in their company. So therefore, SUGEE people, if you are employee, you should now considering this regulation, and please be aware of this regulation. Okay, so SUGEE people, today's episode's conclusion is be aware of your rights and use that to avoid any overworked or any black company. So thank you, SUGEE people. That's all for today's episode of SUGEE Podcast about Japanese labor law. And thanks for listening. Join us again next week because we will have another useful information for you related to Japan. And make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, or YouTube so you never miss an episode. Plus, if you are interested in what we do, you can stop by our website at sugee.jp. And guys, actually about labor law, we already have articles about that. Maybe you can come or visit our page. You can visit our magazine, SUGEE magazine, and find out the articles in details. Thank you and see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to SUGEE Podcast. Subscribe our channel and turn on notifications. We provide services for businessmen and professionals who work in Kansai. Arigatou gozaimasu.